Alright guys, disassembly has started on Steve's 327 here. I've already posted a video this morning and I just kind of give my opinions on what happened, what I think happened. Anyway, I've already started taking some of the stuff off of it. It's going to get completely disassembled right now. I mean, everything's coming out. The crank, the rods, the pistons, the heads, everything coming apart. Going to do a thorough investigation on the engine, and just see what kind of shape it's all in. I hope, for Steve's sake, that this thing just needs a clean up and a reassembly with, maybe just new rings and bearings and timing chain, cam, lifters, and that type of stuff. That's what I'm hoping. I do want to completely disassemble the heads, put on new valve seals, lap the valves in, at least check them over. But the engine was running fine before. It didn't smoke or anything. But it's been, I'm not sure how long his car's been apart. It's been years, but I don't know how many for sure. So what I did is I took my little handle off the bottom of the GoPro, and I'm going to stick the GoPro down inside the lifter valley up really close so you can get a real good visual of the dirt that's down in this. And you may be able to see something, you may not. I don't know. It's just dirt, dust, sand. I mean, who knows what it is. But you can see the fingertip there is clean. And it sounds gritty when I rub it on there. But that is like a dirt, man. I really feel like the engine was open to the elements when they did that's not oil, you can hear it gritty on the paper towel. I feel like the engine was open when they blasted some of the parts for the car outside, like maybe the chassis got blasted outside and they had the doors open in the shop and the wind blew it in there. I don't know, that's my assumption. But it is coming completely apart and completely checked over. Alright guys, so I got all the valve train out of it. Cam bearings. This one doesn't look too bad. All the lifters are wasted, so the cam's junk. I'm not 100% on this right here, but this is a possibility. So this is a timing chain out of it, and it has what looks like a wrench or a dog bone right there. Then it has a S-261, which I could Google this, you know what I mean? It says S1 right there, or IS. But anyway, this is the lower gear, which I haven't pulled off yet. It has a GM stamping right there. So what I think is, I don't think this is GM because it doesn't have GM stampings on it. And I think they put a new timing chain on it but left the original gear on the crankshaft. And if that's the case, that probably explains why the gear is just eaten alive. That is deep gouges everywhere the chain had rode. It put deep little grooves in the lower gear. So that's probably why it was worn out like it was. But again, I don't know that's for sure, but this says GM and this doesn't. But anyway, that's what I think happened. That's why that timing chain wore out. But I don't like these timing chains anyway. These things, they always stretch out quite a bit. I prefer just a double roller. But anyway, all this stuff down here is clean. There's no grit to it or nothing. All the front of it and everything. But I'll show you the lifters now. These are all the lifters. Now keep in mind, these lifters are supposed to be flat, but they are not zero flat. Lifters are, when they're machined on the ends, they have an angle to them. And that's what makes them spin when the cam's moving around. So if they didn't spin and they stayed still, it would do this very thing. So anyway, I wiped them off with a rag, and there's some that are worse than the others, but you can see the dishes that it's put in them. This one's really deep. That one's really deep. That one's really deep. That one's deep. But anyway, usually when the cam wears the lifter like that, it wears the lobe as well. So the cam and lifter is going to have to be replaced, no doubt, 100%. This is a Lunati cam. This is a hydraulic flat tappet. It says Lunati on it, actually twice. Get out here, and it's cloudy today. So this is a, oh no, it only says Lunati once. I don't have my glasses on, but I can tell it says Lunati. But anyway, it says, I believe DPA 1, I think, and then 280, and then 113. I'm assuming the 113 is, is that a 2? That is a 2, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it's a 2. Anyway, so I'm going to Google that and see what cam was in this. It did sound really good, but when it was idling anyway. But anyway, I'm sure he'll want a cam that's very close to that, if not the same exact one. I don't know. I'll have to just see what he wants. But I'm going to have this thing completely disassembled today to give everything a thorough inspection, like the cylinder walls, you know, the journals on the crank and all that kind of stuff. But at this point, it's pretty much going to get taken to a machine shop, galley plugs removed, it'll be brushed, it'll be vatted, it'll have what a machine shop's supposed to do, have them put cam bearings in it, vat it, you know, and all that stuff. And hopefully it doesn't need bored, and hopefully the crank doesn't need turned. It probably wouldn't hurt to have the crank polished anyway, but so that's kind of what I'm hoping the machine shop will do, is just, you know, cam bearings, vat it, hone it, polish the crank instead of turning it, and, you know, have them bust the cylinder heads apart and, you know, reface them and put new seals on and stuff. But anyway, it is going to be an expensive deal. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, when you're restoring a car and you're not the one doing the work, you're paying somebody to do it, all this stuff needs to be done anyway, because all you need is to have a completely painted frame and detailed, painted engine, all your engine compartment mint, spotless, shiny, and painted like his is. It's all body color in there and very, very nice. That's all you need, is to have to go in there and tear the engine back out of the car, only to chip it or scratch it or dent something trying to get it back out of there to have it done what should have been done in the first place. But that's just my opinion, and I know a lot of people don't have deep pockets, and my cousin Steve sure does not. But to me, this, you could scratch this off as it could have been worse, no doubt. If we would have just got this running and driving, it would have eat itself up. It would have tore up the crank really bad. You know, who knows? It could have, you know, really gouged up the cylinder walls down in there. But the worst part is all this shop dust, sand, dirt, whatever this is. Got a ghost moving my neighbor's trash can. It's windy, I know. I'm just kidding, but the worst part about this is, if this was left, which I'm 100% it was left open with no valve covers and no intake, also that dust and dirt would have got down in here, and then me and Steve started the car. So whatever was in here got pulled down in the cylinders. So if this is that gritty dirty up here, imagine what went down in that cylinder, and that piston ring smashed up against the cylinder wall. You know what I mean? Anyway, it's just gonna have to be fixed correctly anyway. And I can tell you, if this was my car anyway, I wouldn't have cared. I would have tore the engine apart, because it has set for several years. I would have torn the engine apart at least to reseal everything anyway, and probably go in and put new rings and bearings and, you know, touch up the heads and all that, and then it's done. I don't have a worry about it, you know what I mean? But that's just me. Some people are different. Okay, so I did a search on Google, and it put me at Lunati's website, but it's not really this part number. But what came up was a 327, 350 horsepower stock replacement style cam. So I'm assuming that's what this was or is. But anyway, they also, I noticed that it had a thing there on their site, and it said bare bones timing set. And this timing set has I mean, it looks like a bone or a wrench. It looks more like a bone to me, but I did Google that number, and it's a Melling part number, but it may be done for Lunati too. So this is an aftermarket timing set, but they left the GM gear on there, and that's why it eat the living fire out of itself right there. So anyway, you know, it may not have the same mesh design as the gear. I don't know. These look a lot wider at the base than these. These are skinny, and it could be it. I mean, I don't know. I'm just telling you what I found out and what I can see. So right now I'm going to go ahead and pull the cylinder heads off of it, and then we'll see if we got big valves or little valves, and you know, we'll find out a little bit more. We'll be able to see some of the cylinder walls, see what kind of pistons we got. I mean, I don't know if they're flat tops, dish, dome. I mean, who knows? We're about to find out. Well, I buzzed these bolts out, and I'm getting ready to pull the cylinder head, but I just noticed this. So these head bolts are all mix match, which is not good. They're small block Chevy, and they're correct length, but if you look at the head stampings on them, they're mix match. So this is like probably some used head bolts that were in somebody's bin, and they just put in there, you know, what they needed. But you can see an R stamping here, a TR here, a CP here, and you can see how big the circle is on this one and how small the circle is on this one. So that's not something that should have been done, but anyway, that's not a good sign to go into this. But you know, also not having the correct tooth on the bottom, or the gear on the bottom. So I found 2 hack jobs on the engine so far, so whoever done this, now I'm starting to worry about what's on the inside. Cylinder head is off. You can see some of the rusty crud that's down in there. That one's almost completely clogged. This is flat top pistons. I scraped that one off. I could almost see it. It's 30 over, so this is a 30 over flat top piston 327 with double humps, so should run pretty good. However, when you get to looking right here, that is rust. That is more rust. Look at that. Look at that. I don't feel anything super bad, so this would probably hone. I don't even feel a ridge, guys. It's just carbon buildup here. There's nothing. It's scraping off, but there's no ridge. So this cylinder definitely had some water in it, pretty bad. But you can kind of see a little bit of rust specks all over the piston. What I'm wondering is if they power washed the engine to clean it before they painted it, and might have got water down in it, in the cylinders. I don't know that. I'm just throwing that out there. Anyway, I've got the head off here. So there is a big, I mean, you can tell there's signs of rust in the cylinders. There's a big clump of stuff right there, which could have come off and wound up in the cylinder. I do think it's just 194s. These aren't 202s. There's a pretty good amount of space in between the valve. Man, this engine, I mean, this thing with that Lunati cam and that flat top piston and 64cc double humps, man, this thing, I bet this thing would kind of run, you know what I mean? I mean, not really to today's standards, because today 1,000 horsepower is the normal, but not for us guys that live in the old world with small blocks. That is the second wire. I just threw that down without showing it. There's a little curly Q little piece of metal wire, like off a wire brush. I found one in here, and I found another one in there yesterday. So anyway, I need to get it all apart to do a further inspection, but I gotta tell you, I am so glad that we're taking this apart. This could have been bad, man. Them cylinder walls would have got all gouged up. I mean, that's pretty rusty down in there. Usually if water sets a long time, it puts pits in there, and that's not good. It had to have been bored, but I don't feel any pits. I don't see any pits, but we're not done yet. Me and Steve had it running for like 10 seconds, so these pistons aren't where they were sitting for a long period of time before. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take the other cylinder head off, and then I'm going to turn it over and start taking the pistons out of it. Alright guys, so I just pulled the oil pump out of it, and here's the part number on it, USA. So I know what this is. This is M55HV, so this is a Melling high volume oil pump. So this thing would probably be just fine to go ahead and clean it and reuse it. Anyway, I always run stock volume stuff, but this is a high volume pump. Some people like those, but anyway, so that's kind of good news. So I'm getting ready to take all the rod caps off, and then I'm going to knock the pistons out of it. And then I can kind of really get to looking at the rod journals on the crank and really get to look at the cylinder walls and stuff. Now this is something that this has kind of got me stumped, because all my experience in the past with small blocks, I've never had any old stuff. All of the engines, the small blocks that I have built, have had the bigger rod bolts in them. So this took a 7/16 socket, and the ones I usually do for like stock, or you know, they take a 9/16 socket. So when I took this off, this nut, which these do appear to be aftermarket because they're black oxide, they act like lock nuts. You can turn them just fine, and then once they get down at the base of the stud right there, they stop, and I've still got all this space. My question is, if this is a lock nut, I don't understand how you're supposed to get your accurate torque reading like that. Because if you torque this down to spec, it's not going to be accurate. It's not going to have as much torque as what your wrench is saying, because that's a lock nut. That's putting tension on it, you know what I mean? So I'm going to have to ask my buddy Jim about that, unless some of you guys know. I don't know, but I can tell you a 7/16, that small of a setup there, that's, I don't know, man. It's just, I think it's pretty small. But, you know, again, I don't know 327. So right now I'm going to go ahead and basically get the rest of it apart. Let's see what we got. So before I pull the crank and rods out of this engine, I always clean off the main caps, and I want to make sure that they've been numbered. I know the engine's been rebuilt, but I want to make sure I have legible numbers stamped into these, so that for the order that they go into. So when I was looking at them, I couldn't really make out anything on this one. I could barely make out a 2 on this one, barely. I didn't see anything on this one, and I didn't see anything on this one. It looks like F stamped into all these. So I went and I got my stamping kit for digits out of my cabinet, and I went ahead and stamped it on each side. So I got it 1, 2, 3, and 4. You obviously don't have to number the rear, because oil pump bolts on it, it's different than these. So in case you don't know small block Chevy engines, you've heard probably 2-bolt main, 4-bolt main. 4-bolt main refers to the main caps that's bolted to the block. So these 3 right here would have steps in them with an extra bolt. This is just a 2-bolt main block, which is nothing wrong with that. It's not a drag racing engine we're building anyway. So I know that the rod caps bolts the rod bolts have definitely been changed. These are aftermarket, but I'm not 100% on the mains, but they all do match, and they do have a stamping in them. FP is what I think it says. And they all 4 match, so these are not mixed match like the head bolts were. The head bolts I'm just going to toss out. We're definitely not using those. They're all mixed match stuff. They've been stretched, you know what I mean? And head bolts are not very expensive. I think they're like 30 bucks or something. So we'll just go ahead and get a new set anyway. But anyway, so that's pretty much the difference in the main caps there. But anyway, on small block Chevys, on the main caps, when you get to look at them, they have a little arrow stamped or cast into them right here. You see that little arrowhead right there? That goes forward. So all the main caps have been put on correctly, but before I removed them, I re-stamped them, so I know for sure that's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. You do not want to mix those up. Do not ever just throw those in there. And definitely do not have the arrow going backwards. So same with your rod caps. The rod caps are particular the way they go on. So this one I already had off yesterday, and I looked at the bearing and everything. It does have Clevite 77 bearings in it. which is not a bad little bearing anyway. I think in my 400 I put in my 55. I think I went with, I did a tri-metal. I think it was a Cleveite, but I went with a tri-metal. They have a bimetal and a tri-metal. And I'll show you on these rod caps. This is something when you're reassembling an engine. You see that little notch right there in that rod bearing right there? That bearing has a little notch in it, and it goes into that slot in that rod cap. When you go to install this back on the rod, that goes to another one that's on the rod that is the same setup, has the notch bearing and the notch in the rod. It'll be opposite each other, but they go together. So if you get to looking at it right here, you can see right underneath my finger there, you can see that little square notch right there. That is the same deal. So these two notch pieces go together, although when you put it on, they'll be opposite of each other. So don't put that notch on this end. It needs to go notch to notch. So that is another important factor on small blocks. I got to tell you guys, if you've never tried to rebuild a little small block Chevy on your own, it's not that difficult to do. There's lots of stuff online you can read. I mean, I started in the 90s rebuilding my engines after my friend Jim. He built a lot of engines for me, and I was there for that. So I watched and learned how he did it, and that's how I started building mine. But anyway, there's lots of parts on the market, and it's just whatever Jim always said to use is what I always used. So there's been advancements and stuff, so there are probably better parts than what used to be from 30 years ago. But anyway, if you've never built small block, that's just some tips there. And again, I'm not the world's leading engine builder. I'm not Steve Morris by any stretch. It's just this is all I've ever done in my life is small block Chevys and built them. So I know these engines pretty well. I'm not an expert on them, but I can keep mine on the road, we'll say that. Well, it never fails. You can hear the rain hitting the carport. So now I got to move everything in, get it out of the weather. So I got one piston out so far, getting ready to knock the other one out. I got the rod cap off, and I've got my little protective sleeves on the rod bolts, so when I go to knock it out, it doesn't gouge the crankshaft up. I wiped the cylinder wall out with a rag and looked it over. I mean, it's got some up and down scratch marks from the skirts, but it's not terrible. But that's just one. I mean, I've still got 7 more to go. But right now, I guess I'm gonna have to put everything back in the garage and wait for the rain to pass before I can come back out here and work, because I don't have any room in the garage with all the crap in the way to work in there. Well, the rain stopped, so come back out, and this time I pulled the engine out further underneath the carport, where if it does start raining again, it won't get me wet or the engine wet, and the table as well. So I took 2 more pistons out. This one, the rings are stuck in it. It did pop loose on this side, but I was piddling with it trying to get it broke free, but that top one's good and stuck. Man, I messed with it. It'll come out, but I thought, man, I better video that before. So this ring would have been stuck, and you can see the stuff that has got wedged down in between there, and it's gritty. So I mean, it's probably carbon as well, but that's probably when we started it, we sucked all the stuff from the that was down in the cylinder head from the intake being left off of it. It sucked it down into the cylinders. So man, good thing we took this thing apart. Now so far, I've just got 4 of them out of it. So far, there's no bad spots in the crank. So this probably just needs a light polish, man. I think so far, I'm really hopeful right now. If this crank just needs polished and the cylinder walls just need honed, Steve is going to save a ton of money. You know what I mean? That's freaking awesome, man. All right, so I took number 5 out, and it's got a little bit of discoloration around the crank here, which is not a big deal. I don't feel anything. It does have a couple of nick marks right here. So anyway, a polish will take care of it, but definitely need to polish it. That's I mean, these 2 journals look really nice, but that one there is discolored. I don't really know why that would be discolored unless water set there or something. I don't know. Engine block is disassembled. This bearing is over there, but anyway, these main bearings are still in here, and I mean, they don't look too bad. They do have some lines in them. However, there's two main caps, the bearings, they don't look fantastic at all. If you can see that, there's a little bit of copper showing in that left side there, and it's discolored. You can see some copper gouge marks all the way through, and that could be very well when me and Steve started it, all that trash from up here started going through it. It could be, not gonna say for certain. It definitely had one piston with a stuck ring, and let's see, they did have the rear main end dead even flat, which I like to offset them a little bit. Like they've got the rear main seal dead even. I like to prop it a little bit where it's sticking up on one side a little bit, and then do the main cap the opposite. That's just me. I mean, everybody's different. I didn't build it, so anyway, I wiped out the cylinder walls, but I haven't turned the engine over to look at the cylinder walls, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so I flipped the engine over and I pulled it out here out from the carport so we can get some light in here. And it's cloudy today, so I'm not getting a good amount of light, but we have rust staining in the cylinder walls from having water in the cylinders and setting. Most likely from the engine being pressure washed. Quite possibly, I don't know if they did or not, but they did paint the engine. Maybe they pressure washed it, cleaned it up, and painted it. Anyway, the water could have got down in there and it just set. There is a pretty bad pit area right here. It's pretty bad pitted. I don't know if that'll hone out or not. It might. Not good at all, really. This is the worst one right here. So only the machine shop will be the one that can tell us about that. But I mean, there's just little stains everywhere. But as far as pitted cylinders, yeah, I guess there is a little spot right here. These over here, I mean, I know these will hone out, but this one has me worried right here because it's got some pitting right here. Anyway, they might be able to hone that out. I hope. So, I mean, my assessment, if it was mine and I was trying to save money and I was doing this at home, I would pretty much knock all the galley plugs out of it, and I would take it to the machine shop. I'd have it vatted, new cam bearings, you know, basically cleaned really nice, and have them hone it, because this needs to be checked by a professional. But anyway, I would try, if that cylinder wall ends up honing out, I would just re-ring it and re-bearing it. The crank, however, they might actually have to turn the mains. I don't know. You can feel on every main cap journal, it has some, you can feel it, your fingernail catches it. The little bitty, they're fine, but again, the machine shop's going to have to be the ones to make the call on that. But the rod journals are awesome. I think they'll polish up fine. But this is a cast crank. This is not a steel crank. You can see by the cast line right here, and it's grooved. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's going to have to go to the machine shop, man. It's going to have to be checked over by a professional. I mean, I'm hopeful that this one cylinder will hone out, you know what I mean? I'm hopeful. But I am a little nervous about it. I mean, I can feel it with my finger right here in this groove, and it's definitely had water setting in it. It is what caused that. And again, I can't say if it's from it being pressure washed and just sitting with water in the cylinders. This engine could have been overhauled and set for a while before it was put in the car when Steve bought it. I mean, I don't know, man. I can only assume, you know what I mean? But, I mean, you can see cross-hatching in most of the cylinders still in them, so, I mean, that's a good sign. There's no ridge at the top, but it is a very dirty engine. Even the coolant passages are pretty dirty, so it needs to be vatted. It really does. And if they've added, it's going to mess up the paint on it, so the whole engine will have to be painted at that point. But anyway, guys, that's Steve's 327, completely tore down. It's ready to go to a machine shop and be thoroughly inspected by a professional, which I am not. I can assemble a small block, but I'm not gonna, you know, make the calls on this stuff because it is not my engine. Anyway, I got a mess to clean up, so I'm gonna get all this stuff. I got to get a new board made. I've got one big board that it's a 4x4 post, and I have it all drilled, and I've got it labeled left and right, front and rear, and I keep my push rods and all the rocker arms and stuff in order as I take them out. They hang in that wood basically, but I've got all my 305 stuff for my wife's car on that board, so I'm gonna have to drill a new one. I do have another 4x4 post out there in the pile of trash out back, wood pile, so I'll just use it, drill some holes and get that stuff all labeled. Head bolts, I'm just gonna throw them away. They're all mixed match. This is something that I thought was kind of strange. It has this, to me it feels like silicone, but it's brown, so I don't know. But it was on every head bolt, so I don't know if that was what they used for their sealant, was a silicone, which is not what I use. I use a thread sealant paste, just a little bit of it. But again, everybody's different when they do their engines. But anyway, that stuff is rubbery and gummy and messy, and in reality, this is what could be in the bottom of that oil pan, just covered in black oil stuff. So, you know what I mean? But who knows? So that is going to be it for today for Steve's engine. It's all tore down. It's ready to go to a machine shop. So I'm not sure if he's going to come and get it and take it over there, or if he wants me to take it over there. It's there's a machine shop in his town, so if he comes and get it, he can take it over there and have him look it over. But my truck, the transmission's, it's a little weak. It slides a little bit, so I have to drive it real easy, and I really don't like driving it really far unless I have to. So I'm hoping it'll last me till the winter, so I can tear it out of there and put a kit in it myself. So again, trying to save money because I can't afford to have a transmission rebuilt, and most likely I'll have the transmission out 3 or 4 times before it's right. That's usually what goes, right? Thanks for watching.